even at Series A stage, looking ahead, you will go through so much. It could be pivots, it could be running out of money, it could be fundraising, it could be hiring and firing. So what stays constant actually is probably not the business idea, not the business model. The markets would have changed, but what would still be constant would be the founding team.
Hey founders, this is Serene, co-founder and CEO of vibefam. Today, I'll be having an in-depth conversation with Puiyan LEUNG on what it takes to bring a startup from a 100K ARR stage to a Series A funding stage. Puiyan serves as partner investment in Vertex Ventures, Southeast Asia and India, and primarily focuses on opportunities in Southeast Asia. Vertex Ventures, Southeast Asia and India is a leading global VC and primarily invests in startups in the Series A stage and beyond. Let's get started.
Hi, Puiyan. Thanks so much for taking time today for this chat with me. Since we are recording this in the beginning of the year, I thought maybe we could kick off this conversation with you sharing with us whether you have the habit of setting New Year's resolutions.
Yeah, so I thought about this question before coming here, and it's an interesting one. Towards the last few days of the year, I caught up with some YouTube videos. And one of the videos that stuck with me is a TED Talk by conductor Benjamin Zander. And in the video, he basically explained his thinking that positive thinking is a fraud, possibility is a discipline, and a language of creation. And it stuck with me ever since then. So, for us as VCs, we have to be eternal optimists. We need to see the possibility of every opportunity. But yet, sometimes during the difficult times, we ask ourselves, are we hallucinating? Are we just thinking that things will become better? Is there really light at the end of the tunnel? Or is baseless sort of blind faith? So going into the new year, we are still in some turbulent time. What I hope to do is to still, be an optimistic investor, a professional, a confidant to my founders, but also, be sensible, what is possible, what is not.
I love that. How's it going for you so far into the year?
It's no news to anyone that 2023 was a rough year, for many reasons. The world is in chaos and the tech scene is going through some ups and downs. We have had our fair share from within our fund from a work perspective. Some of our portfolios are actually doing very well. Others are forced to think about cutting burn, restructuring, and thinking about long-term business sustainability. So going into 2024, we are all pretty optimistic. As a fund, we announced our latest Fund 5 last year. It is not a small fund, $541 million, and we're ready to deploy. So we are very excited for what the opportunities bring in the region. We are ready to back more promising ideas, promising founders. All in all, I think it's pretty good. Yeah.
That's very, very exciting. Really good news. So maybe to start the conversation, I thought maybe I can give a quick introduction into what I'm building right now to set the context of this discussion. So I'm building vibefam, and it's a software as a service business software for service-based businesses. So eventually the vision is really to serve any kind of business that, runs services. Right now we are big on fitness gyms, yoga, Pilates, dance studios. We help them with reservations, payments, and also marketing tools to help them grow their revenue. Last year, we just crossed our 100K ARR mark. So I thought maybe for today's discussion, we could discuss a little bit about how you see a startup kind of moving from the stage that I'm currently at, which is like the 100K ARR mark, to a Series A funding stage. So maybe the first question would just be, how long in your experience do startups typically take to reach from 100K ARR to like a Series A stage?
Some companies do it in a heartbeat. Some really never see the light of day. So I hope that it, happens for you sooner rather than later, right? And I think it depends on many factors. When a new startup launch a new idea, new business proposition to the market, many times the founders get excited about the initial traction. But many times they also forget that maybe the initial users are just the early adopters, right? They would be willing to try and experiment anything, and sometimes maybe even willing to pay. But if that is your market size, then it's too niche, right? So the journey to proving product market fit can be a difficult one, a challenging one with many ups and downs. So yeah, to answer your question, I hope that it happens sooner rather than later for you, but proving market fit can sometimes prove to be difficult for some startups.
typically would there be a time range that is quite the average?
Well, time range that would be quite an average. I should talk about the parameters or the indicators of whether a business is reaching product market fit, right? So, in your case, you would have both the supply side and the demand side. For example, the suppliers in your case would be the fitness gyms, the studios, the service providers. The demand side would be the actual end users of the service. So one good indicator would be the growth rate and the retention quality of both the supply and demand. I mean, if you are subsidizing for growth on both sides, you're giving $10 for every sign up for users, or if you're offering the whole service for free, or even offering some subsidy, then actually it doesn't actually prove that the market is willing to pay for your service. But if you can show both user growth and revenue retention and growth on both ends, then it is a very powerful indicator that your product is what actually the market wants. I would say that other indicators we look for as we're evaluating Series A opportunities would also be definitely the unit economics, right? So some founders would ask me, must I reach 1 million ARR before I can raise Series A? And honestly, I actually thought about it. It's really arbitrary. The answer is yes and no. No mean, what if you hit, 850K? So can I raise Series A already? Or what if I already have 1.5 million ARR? Doesn't mean that I'll definitely raise the money. And the answer is no on both counts, right? So, but if you're able to grow your company from 100,000 ARR to 1 million ARR, it must mean a few things. It must mean that you have, build up a hopefully quality customer pool who is willing to consistently pay for your service. I think that's point one. Number two, you probably would have to have adjusted your go-to-market strategy a little bit along the way, whether it's adjusting the pricing, the acquisition strategy, the packaging, the proposition. You might have pivoted your offering a number of times, right? So right now, maybe you're focusing on certain genres. Over time, you realize that it sticks better with others. Maybe, the demographic, your early assumption, maybe, it's good as early adopters, but for stickiness, maybe it's another, So by the time you reach 1 million ARR, you will have gone through all these ups and downs, and you will be able to talk through it. So as an investor, or a Series A investor, we look for these signs, like what lessons have you drawn, and how have those lessons informed your future strategy? Maybe another dimension that would be worth talking about is the team construct. So when you start out, it's probably you and your founder, maybe someone else to help you, so 3 people. By the time you grow to 1 million ARR, it's not possible to manage with just 3 people. You might have grown your team to somewhere between, 8 to 15, which is just a, rough approximation. It means that you must have a decision-making matrix. A lot of times at this stage, the founder and the CEO will still, make direct decision for everything, but there must be some processes, in place to help you with the decision-making process. You would have to have, attracted those talent, right? So if you're able to attract good talent, good quality talent who you maybe give a C-suite labeling, it must mean that you are able to sell your vision. So we also look at team dynamics, founder dynamics, team structure. What else? Also use of funds. So, nomenclature is sometimes very subjective, right? A seed round, an angel round could be a few $100K, it could be a few $1 million. Some founders just went through all of that, right? Some founders are more prudent, but that may also mean that they're too careful and not thinking about growth. So we would also try to double click on your historical use of funds to see what has gone right, what has gone wrong, where could the opportunities be. So all in all, I would say that top line is just one dimension on how we evaluate a Series A opportunity. We look holistically at the market size, at the founder dynamics, at the team structure, at the go-to-market strategy, at the product roadmap.
That's a lot to cover, but just out of curiosity, right? The weightage of these things that you evaluate at a Series A stage, do you think it's quite different from when a VC evaluates a startup at a seed or a pre-seed level? I feel like all these terms are very familiar because
Yeah.
when I speak to investors, they do tell me this thing, but I'm just wondering whether or not the weightage is different at the Series A stage.
I think obviously the answer has to be yes, right? If you think about pre-seed or even sometimes seed, there should be no traction. Like even if you're a B2B company, then you probably at best have a number of POCs. Some may not even be paid, right? So I think the underwriting then has to be a bit different. But I think maybe what is common for, up to Series A or beyond would be founder profile, founder dynamics, founder background, founder motivation, and founder quality. That I think still is quite key, even as the company grow to a Series A stage. Yeah. We try to spend a lot of time understand why the founder is doing what he or she is doing. Why not something else? Why this? And whether what is the dynamics between the co-founders? What is dynamics between the founding team and the key management? Ultimately, even at Series A stage, looking ahead, you will go through so much. It could be pivots, it could be running out of money, it could be fundraising, it could be hiring and firing. So what stays constant actually is probably not the business idea, not the business model. The markets would have changed, but what would still be constant would be the founding team. So I think that is probably common between seed and Series A.
I guess something that I'm personally quite curious about is on valuation.
Yeah.
I know that in this climate today is maybe slightly different.
Yeah.
Is there a specific valuation that you tend to look at for Series A startups?
Yeah. Valuation is an art and it's also a science. I think it's no surprise it's no longer news to our ecosystem that valuation has plummeted. Valuation is driven by so many things: market sentiment, the tech, the traction, the sector, the business model, right? I often encourage founders to think about valuation the other way, right? So rather than thinking I want my Series A to be X value, think about how much money you need to get to the next milestone. So, for example, let's say your narrative for Series A is that I have already well penetrated in sector A, and I'm raising fund to experiment and grow sector B, or you are, kind of stable in the home market. I'm raising Series A to test market number 2, right? If that's the narrative, then think about how much do I need to prove out that milestone, right? To help you penetrate market number 2, launch product line number 2, how much do you need? And then maybe add a little bit of buffer. Because then once you get to that milestone, you will be in a good position to raise the next round at a higher valuation. But till then, don't get too distracted. Think about what you need first. Then the dilution will come. Usually founders will take, usually VCs at Series A may take anything between, high single digit percentage to, maybe, even up to 25, sometimes even 30% of the company, depending on what we are actually talking about, right? It's because even at Series A is very early stage, we will get diluted along the way. So we need to have a interesting enough ownership for us to proceed sometimes. So then you just need to work backwards. It's sometimes maths, right? If you need to raise 1 million, for example, and if dilution is anything between, 7, 8 to 20%, then that is your valuation range, right? But I would say that in this climate, and this is something I think still holds, it holds true always, but especially in this climate, cash is king. Don't get too hard up on the valuation. If let's say you are able to raise more, right? So for example, let's say you are targeting to raise 1 million or 2 million, but you have interest for 2.5 or even 3, right? But the investor is not willing to budge on the valuation, for argument's sake. That's the construct. So sometimes founders will be faced with a situation and they go, yeah, okay, maybe I don't take 3, I just take 2 so that I reduce my dilution. It's a fair point, right? You as a founder, you need to stay motivated with enough ownership. Otherwise, then you're just an employee for an investor, right? So founder ownership is always important, but cash is important. Cash is king. sometimes I say you can't eat EBITDA. Cash is what you need to operate a business. So in this climate where the pace of fundraising is uncertain, then if you have access to a little bit more, I do encourage the founder to think about whether to think about taking more, and you can get creative with the construct so that you can stay sufficiently motivated.
That's a really good advice though. You covered quite a bit. So at the Series A stage, would you say that most startups come in having already raised a round before that? Or do you also see those that are bootstrapped as well?
Most likely, Series A startups would have raised a seed round and sometimes an angel round before. So that's quite typical in our market. There are also those that are bootstrapped, and they might even be profitable or have gotten to a certain size, and the founder decided to launch a new business line or rethink their business model, do something different, or go after a different market, and then they decide to raise. There is no hard and fast rule. But for companies that have never raised money before and they suddenly want to raise Series A, I may ask a few additional questions. For example, especially if the company has been founded for a while. So, if the company has been around for 5 years, 7 years or more, they have been bootstrapped all the way, and suddenly they want to raise a Series A. It's okay. I mean, we have seen those, and we would evaluate all. But operating a business as a sole decision maker and you're the only one on the board, it's very different from having to deal with investors, having to deal with shareholders, having to deal with different type of boardroom dynamics. So I would ask questions to try to understand, why do you want to raise money now all of a sudden, right? How would you feel about having to deal with investors, right? How do you think about exit profile? If you are a sole owner of a business, then it's okay, right? If you can drive the top line to $100 million top line, it's great. But if not, then you can always optimize on profitability, and if the shop stays decently sized, it's actually a very viable sort of lifestyle choice for many founders. But for VCs, we are not lifestyle investors. We look for outsized return because the failure rate for startups is so high. So every opportunity needs to be a home run for us, at least, when we evaluate it at that point in time. So then we would want to drive growth fast, but we also want to see pathway to profitability fast, sooner rather than later. So it can become, sometimes discussion can become quite high octane, right? But it may or may not be for everyone. So I would also maybe just ask a few more questions in that direction to ensure that there is a founder investor fit.
So circling back to the point about like startups before Series A have already gotten funding, either through angels, institutions, or any other forms. Are there any red flags on the cap table that you have seen, in terms of the equity?
Well, we would always look at the founder ownership at that point in time, collectively and individually, right? So if you have diluted yourself too much by the time you go to Series A, then it's a potential flag, or at least a point for discussion. Right, because if at Series A you already own very little, then after 2 more rounds you're just an employee. Then your motivation is different. So, but structurally there are many ways to address that. There can be an ESOP top up. There can be, there are many ways to do, but it's definitely something we'll look out for. We will also look out for companies with like way too many investors, and by too many, there's no definition. Is 5 too many, 20 too many? But well, in Singapore, you know that if you have 50 investors in your cap table, you automatically become like a pseudo-private public company. The reporting is slightly different. But putting that aside, if there are too many investors on the cap table, then I would like to understand from the founder, what has the shareholder dynamics been? Are there like a couple of alphas that drive the boardroom conversation, or they kind of just leave you to run your own thing because they own so little, they're not vested. Conversely, if there's one that owns a lot, then I'll also like to understand what the dynamics is in, because when we come in as investor, then we add to the dynamic or change the dynamics a little bit. But by and large, I think it is not uncommon for us to see Series A startups already having raised a couple of rounds. So it's quite typical, yeah.
What kind of dilution would you say would be too much at the Series A stage before you enter?
Yeah, really, it really depends on the sector, the business model, etc. But if if the founders collectively own less than 50% by the time they go to Series A, then they are at risk of being diluted way too much more by the time they grow even further.
So I think for the next part of the discussion, I thought of some topics that are pretty close to my heart, and it has to do with like female founded startups.
Okay.
So I'm sure you talk to a lot of startups every day. I'm curious to know how often do you see female founders trying to raise around at the Series A stage?
I would say that there can always be more, right? I am actually very proud of the fact that Vertex Ventures Southeast Asia and India has a pretty robust female-led portfolio. I think in our last fund, at least more than 35% of our portfolio are led by at least one female founder. And I think that's actually probably much better than industry average. But why not half, right? Even if it is 30-40%, it could have been half, 50%. So I think there's still some work we have to do as a whole ecosystem to get us there. I'm also very proud to share that our latest fund, Fund 5, has a sidecar component which is meant to back female founders. So there's an additional $50 million pool as part of that 541, which is available to companies that led by at least one female founder. So we as a fund really believe in this cause. We want to see more representation. We want to back more female-led companies. And we are doing, our little bit to contribute, hopefully contribute.
I was able to find some stats online, and it seemed to suggest that about 17% of like VC funding goes to startups with at least one female founder. So that definitely is much lower than what you just shared, which is 35%, right?
There you go.
Vertex Ventures.
Come to us.
Yeah, so that's really good to hear. So why do you think is the case right now, like largely in the market, that female founders secure so much less venture funding than male founders?
Yeah, so maybe if I can break it down, there could be a few components, right? Actually, I think even before we talk about whether there are biases and all that, there's probably a top of the funnel problem. Like there are just not enough female-led companies in the market, right? So why wouldn't women, rock star women come out and start their own companies? There could be many reasons, right? And I think one of the reasons that is quite close to my heart is representation. Yeah. So I think representation matters. Seeing someone who is successful, who look like you, feel like you, and look like she's in a similar circumstances as you are, make a huge difference. If I see that the entire industry, people who are deemed successful all look a certain way and definitely not like me, then I go, okay, maybe that's not really for me, right? So I think, as our ecosystem mature and we have more successful female founders, female business leaders, female change makers, then the younger ones or even maybe mid-career ones will go, okay, I think if they can do it, I can do it. Why not take the first leap of faith? So that hopefully will solve the top of the funnel problem, and we will have more companies that are female-led, right? I guess the second part, and that one, if you talk to different people, everybody have different opinions. Is there inherent biases in the ecosystem? Do we evaluate things differently? We are in the award season at the moment from an entertainment industry perspective. People are debating whether certain people should be nominated for a certain movie award or not. It's a whole thing, right? I think maybe in our industry, as we expect business leaders to behave a certain way, maybe. Must be very alpha, must be very eloquent, must be able to command the room once he or she walks in. And and this is generalizing, but many times, a woman business professional may not fit into that narrative immediately when she walks into the room. But it doesn't mean that she lacks substance, she lacks competency or knowledge, right? You might just have to double click and actually listen to what she is actually saying, rather than the tone and rather than the aura that she has, to evaluate whether this is a person with leadership qualities, with conviction, with vision. So I think we can all do our part to ask the right question to sort of peel the onion a little bit more. But ultimately, I think if we have more representation, more people stepping forward to be female entrepreneurs, then we would naturally, hopefully, see more money being funneled to female-led startups like yourself. Yeah.
I love that. I'm personally also a little bit guilty of sometimes falling trapped to like wanting to fit into a certain mold. So when I was speaking to one of my investors, it was a lady. She actually reminded me that I was a little bit too like task oriented, when trying to sell the vision, trying to sell the business. And she said it's very common for female founders to behave in this manner because sometimes we subconsciously try to overcompensate in certain areas and instead like fall short of selling ourselves as individuals. So I love what you said about having female representation. I think that's very important. So another perspective that, I read about that I thought would be interesting to also discuss would be on investor gender. So
Yeah.
I've seen that, in general, I think most investors are males. And I also found some stats that suggested that about 75% of VCs don't have a female partners at the table. So do you think that is also one, I guess, like factor to consider when discussing this?
Yeah. In my firm, 3 out of 8 partners in our partnership are women. So I'm one of the 3 that's part of the 8. So I think I'm royally proud of that, and it probably beat the industry by far. This boils down to it's actually not just about men or women. It's about having a diverse team, diverse investment team with different background, different expertise, different professional interests, different evaluation lens, different intuition, to source and evaluate different deals, right? So, and gender, I think, is maybe one important dimension, right? So from whether evaluating a founder is aspirational enough, visionary enough, can hit the ground and command the room, to, whether the market is a right choice for whatever reason, I truly believe that having a diverse team help us source different type of deals and help us debate deals in a more healthy manner. I personally feel that being a female professional has definitely helped me connect well with many female founders, right? As a female investment professional, being a woman has allowed me the opportunity to have different kind of conversation with female entrepreneurs. I also work with male founders, obviously, but maybe with female founders, I'm able to double click and connect at a different level. So I really advocate having a highly diverse team.
Okay, so to close our discussion, so one of my all-time favorite podcasts is this podcast called How I Built This by Gairas. He always closes his podcast with this question to his guests. So the question is, between luck and hard work, which one do you think weighs more in a startup success based on your experience?
This is a question that I still ask myself sometimes, right? And I think there is a saying that says luck is where preparation meets opportunity. Yeah, and I think that's really true. Without the right platform, even if you have prepared yourself well, worked hard, done all your homework, without the right, if you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, it will just not work, right? Market's not ready, whatever it is, right? But without the preparation, when the moment is there, even if you seize it, to be honest, you might fall flat on your face without the right muscle, without the right discipline. So it's probably an intersection. I mean, until the luck comes, then all of us better be well prepared. The spirit of possibility is a language of creation. You have to work towards creating that opportunity for yourself, creating the luck to have.
I love that. Thank you so much, Puiyan.
Thank you.
Appreciate the chat we had.
Thank you so much. Good luck with your startup and fundraise.
Thank you. Thank you so much.